So I was 4 years old, standing at the end of our block on the edge of the alley with my 5-year-old sister, Jeanette. Because that's as far as we were allowed to go. And we're leaning against that invisible barrier, peering up and down the alley to see if we can spot our dad's car parked behind one of the bars. And both of us trying to be the first one to see it, and one of us every now and then daring to dash out into the alley to get a better look, and then back to that line we weren't supposed to cross. But both of us secretly hoping that it wasn't there, because if it was there, that meant there'd be trouble at home. This is the early 1960s, you know, the tail end of the baby boom, Polish neighborhood on the west side of Detroit. It was a neighborhood full of these little post-war bungalows, each of them just teeming with children. It's kind of neighborhood where older Polish women might say, "Oh, God's only blessed them with 5 little ones." Say, I'm one of 11, plus our grandfather lived with us, and we weren't even the biggest family in the neighborhood. And on our block, just that one block on Westwood, there was 85 children. It's a great place to be a kid. Now the business strip was equally bustling. All these little mom and pop stores piled one on top of another, but because it was a Polish neighborhood, let's just say there was a preponderance of bars, bakeries, bars, you know, good butcher shops, you know, and a shoemaker, IGA, 5 and dime thrown in, you know, and most of the dads and some of the moms worked for the big 3 automakers, you know, because this was the boom time for the American automobile industry. And thanks to the UAW, you know, they could earn a living wage, you know, and support all those little businesses. But if you've ever worked in a factory or foundry, stamping plant, you know that was hard work and dangerous. So you can understand why you might want to stop at the bar for a Boilermaker, you know, a shot and a beer before you head home to face all those kids. But you also understand why, if you're the one at home keeping supper warm on the stove, you know, because we crowd around that little table every night for supper, you might be keeping one eye on that clock, you know, just counting the minutes, you know, until you got some relief. But one day, my mom decided to stop arguing and to write instead. And this went on month after month after month. And then August comes around, it's time for us to go back to school. At that point, I think there was 7 of us that were about school age. You know, the first 7 were all stair steps, right? We went to St. Peter and Paul, this Polish Catholic school on the west side of Detroit. You know, back when Detroit had hundreds of neighborhood Catholic schools. And my mom and dad are sitting at the kitchen table, and my mom slides a list over to my dad. It's all the school supplies and uniforms and shoes for, you know, those of us who didn't have hand-me-downs, and all the things she needed to buy for school. My dad's looking at it and trying to figure out how he's going to pay for this. My dad was great at squeezing a penny. She lets him look for a little bit, and then she slides him another list. This is what she'd been writing for 6 months. She'd been keeping track, a tally, of all the money he'd spent at the bar and on cigarettes. Now he's looking at one list, he's looking at the other, he's looking at one, he's looking at the other, and he finally makes a decision. He chooses us. And that day, though he's in his 40s by now, he quit, and been smoking since he was a kid, quit smoking, quit going to the bar. Though he kept a case of Strohs in the basement fridge, you know, for when my uncles would come over. But that, you know, that would last like 6 months, right? And because he chose us, I have a childhood full of these great memories of my dad coaching and umping Little League, you know, involved with different church and neighborhood organizations, and, you know, going to parent-teacher conferences, helping us with our homework, though he did get a little overzealous with homework. You know, he surrounded us with books, you know, because he had dropped out of school in the 9th grade to work. And I remember coming home from kindergarten and telling him I had to learn my ABCs. He said, well, anybody can learn their ABCs. If you want to learn them, you got to learn them forward and backwards. That's how you know something. So he made me memorize them forward and backwards. ZYXWBUTSRQPOMNLKJIHGFEDCBNA 53 years later. And because he chose us, he got to see all of us grow to adulthood, enjoy a couple dozen grandkids, long retirement with my mom. And finally, because he chose us, that memory of my sister and I standing at that alley looking to find his car behind the bar is just that, a lonely memory that in no way defines our childhood.